30% of what brands produce ends up in landfills. It's garbage, states Guram Goslava, the CEO of the Swiss luxury brand Vetements. In a recent push to highlight the impact of overproduction, the Swiss brand launched a 12-month traveling exhibition to increase awareness of the impact corporations and consumers have on sustainable fashion. While the brand is still considered to be small, despite the increase in demand for their products, the high sell-through rates, and their prohibitive price, Vetements is starting the conversation around whole system collaboration and change when considering eco-awareness in fashion. In whole system collaboration and change, entire organizations, communities, groups, and teams enable their systems to transform. Transformation on such a large scale requires active participation, self-awareness, and appreciation of all parts. While the scope of these change programs is broad, it requires a substantial contribution from internal and external stakeholders who participate in the system. In this exercise, I reviewed the 5 required change initiatives of appreciative inquiry, open space, charrettes, future search, and graphic facilitation, as well as 3 additional change methods: scenario thinking, peer spirit circling, and community weaving. The 3 selected change methods were chosen for their unique approach to community change initiatives, future-oriented thinking, and the establishment of trust and common interest. For my initial readings, I assumed my selected change methods would have little or no relation to the required methods. However, I was surprised and delighted to find that each method contributed to a holistic view of change. Each method had a unique viewpoint or skill critical to whole system collaboration and change. After reviewing the texts, I began work on my affinity diagram. Utilizing the web software Trello, I was able to create virtual notes that I could easily move into the desired 6 principles. Reviewing the affinity diagram exercise, patterns began to emerge from each of the 6 design elements. The more structured element of system showed that change initiatives can range in scope and scale, but typically work best when diversity of stakeholders and viewpoints is considered. The more abstract category of purpose saw more general themes or motives than specific patterns. These focused on discovery, relationships, and community. Taking the elements from the affinity diagram, I began to work on my mind map. After staring at a blank screen for several minutes, Googling, how do I mind map, and reviewing several of the provided articles, I decided to stop overthinking and just dive in. The result was this mind map. Using the web software Coggle allowed me to transpose my affinity diagram into branches and nodes stemming from the 6 design principles of purpose, journey, system, values, evidence, and model. The systems principle tended to include elements of size, structure, setting, and application. When reviewing the mind map, patterns of size, reason for change, and stakeholder interest emerged. These patterns were all broad in scope, but suggested that systems should have an idea of what needs or should be changed prior to the intervention. The use of facilitators was an unexpected commonality between many of the change methods. This suggests that leaders should take a hands-off approach to allow participants to freely express their ideas. Purpose refers to the reasons for the system-wide change initiatives. 3 principles emerge from this element: scope of change, short-term effects, and long-term outcomes. Based on the needs of the system, different methods could be combined to achieve long-term gains while creating quick short-term effects to build and reinforce positive behaviors. For example, the method of graphic facilitation could be used to launch a change initiative, creating an emotional link to the large-scale change, while charrettes could be used to break down that larger-scale initiative into easily digestible steps that can be taken by stakeholders, both internally and externally. The journey element is where the bulk of the mind mapping took place. Many of the change initiatives require multiple phases completed over some time. Principles of time, steps, orientation, and follow-through emerged as being consistent across most change interventions. A key focus in this sphere was the connection to self-awareness principles of standards, motivation, monitoring, and willpower. Not only was it up to individuals to focus on their own needs and their own wants and their own desire to change, but to bring that forefront to the group and to express their needs and their interests accordingly. The principle of evidence was more difficult than I assumed it would be. Coming from a social sciences background, I'm used to interventions being rooted in theory and reinforced with statistical validity. The opposite was true for many of these interventions covered. While some change initiatives were rooted in theory, others simply drew from a general sense of purpose or humanity. The most common patterns to emerge were those of community engagement and team theory. As a participant or facilitator, I have little experience with many of the change methods outlined. Therefore, I cannot provide my input on how these methods work. The principle with the most common patterns was by far values. Since whole system collaboration and change requires strong communication and relationship building, it was not surprising to see that most initiatives valued honesty, openness, willingness to change, respect, and diversity. In order to make the largest impact, change initiatives need to consider the roles and perspective of all stakeholders. Creation of safe spaces where ideas can flow naturally is critical to the success of these initiatives. Without this, individuals may not feel comfortable creating the tension needed to move towards change. Of the 8 change initiatives covered for this assignment, only a handful did not have a formalized model, specifically peer spirit circling and to some extent graphic facilitation. The remaining 6 initiatives all had relatively formalized plans. These plans shared the commonality of structuring interventions by starting with the most broad topic and slowly narrowing down to the issues most pressing to the organization. Elements of community engagement and future orientation stood out as being critical to the success of these initiatives. Without support from all stakeholders and from the community at large, many of these initiatives will not find the success they need in order to move forward. The use of affinity mapping in the field is almost boundless. Affinity mapping can be used anytime individuals or a group need to dig deeper into a construct, idea, or question. Most importantly, participants do not need to have a crystal clear vision of what comes next to participate in an affinity diagram activity. Game-storming activities, like affinity diagramming, create a framework for exploration, experimentation, trial and error, allowing the learner to take control of their own experience. The use of mind mapping in the field was a bit more difficult for me to understand. Since the goal of mind mapping is to create links between concepts, it comes across as a much more solitary activity. Since individuals process information in different ways, they may see different patterns or clusters. I see affinity diagramming and mind mapping as 2 separate but connected tools. Organizations could use affinity diagramming to generate ideas, find potential solutions, or determine future problems or scenarios. Mind mapping can then be used to create connections between discovered patterns and current behaviors, enhancing the level of understanding. Once completed individually, groups can come together to discuss their mind maps and to share with one another the connections and the patterns that they discovered in order to create a more holistic view of change. I went into this assignment a little lost, like a man walking through a cave without a torch. Instead of overthinking my approach, I decided to just dive right in. I couldn't have been happier with that decision. While at times I felt lost, I felt uncomfortable, I was discovering new and exciting ideas along the way. The biggest takeaway from this assignment was that learning is sometimes an uncomfortable experience. The use of tools like affinity diagram and mind mapping are not designed to show what you know, but instead allow you to explore new ideas, to find connections and patterns. Thank you.